Hi guys, Giuseppe Caiazzo here from talentsandothersounds.com. Today I'm here to introduce you our new Kontakt library called Piano. Piano is a sound design Kontakt library of prepared piano stabs and rhythms. We had the privilege to access to an astonishing piano boutique here in Italy, in Naples, where we have meticulously sampled a lot of incredible instruments like an ancient piano from the 19th century, an old saloon-piano, and even a piano harmonium that is a one-of-a-kind instrument that contains an organ apparatus. We experimented a lot with several objects on the piano strings by preparing the piano. For example, we have used snare tails, aluminium sheets, cardboard, screws, and the aim was to explore the endless sonic potential of the piano and craft some unique horror sounds. Piano features 530 more royalty-free samples, plus 8 Kontakt instruments to further sculpt and manipulate the samples I'm going to show you in this video, and for a total of 2.6 gigabytes of material. At the moment we are running an intro deal for Piano of $29, the regular price is $59, and this will be until April the 30th. And during this period, if you buy Piano, you can also purchase a string gig, which is our popular horror strings library, for only $29 instead of $59. So you can buy both together and pay the cost of one library and getting actually two. So first thing, let's have a look at the instruments that we have in Piano, and to give you an idea about the kind of sounds and the manipulating possibilities that you have within the Kontakt interface. So the first thing that I would like to show, the first instrument, as you can read here, is called Tonal Stabs, where, as the name suggests, most of these samples are characterized by a clear and perceivable root key. Okay, and we have mapped this instrument in Kontakt by matching each sample with the corresponding root note on the virtual keyboard. So let's have a listen. So, as you can hear, it's the sound of the piano, but it's also something else. You can hear some odd harmonics that happen along the sample, and a peculiar texture that is given each time by one of the different experiments that we did. And also you can hear that each one of these samples is tuned to a root key, and that corresponds to the actual key on the virtual keyboard. The first thing that I would like to highlight, if we are here in this screen called sample, is that you can access to all these controls individually for each sample. This means that if we select, for example, this on D1, you can adjust low pass, high pass, resonance, and also the rate and the amount of an LFO. You can choose whether to assign an LFO to the low pass filter or to high pass filter, and you can also select the shape between cine, triangle, rectangle, and so. You have access to the volume envelope, to the pitch, the volume. All of these parameters are, as I said, controllable individually for each one of the samples. So, of course, as I said, the samples are mapped in a way that they are tuned to the corresponding key on the virtual keyboard, but nothing stops you to change the pitch, for example, if you prefer to have that sample in another root key to let it match, match exactly the track on which you are working. So I think that this is a first important feature of this library that allows you to a large margin of manipulation and editing of the samples. So if I press another sample, you see that this value changes and they correspond to the new sample. So you can do this thing for each one of the samples, as I said. Another thing that I would like to highlight is that when you have tonal samples, like in this instrument, we have added the functionality that allows you to tune all the samples to the same root key. You may ask, why? Well, in many styles of cinematic music, especially in trailer music, rather than having a particularly complex in regard to the let's say harmonic structure of the track, this kind of music relies more on the sound. So you can listen to some incredible tracks that just feature one note, different kind of samples that are each one of them rooted, tuned to the same root key. So with global, if I press global, you see that the knob here changes. You can select to tune all the sample at once simultaneously to a specific root key from C up to B. Okay, so for example, if I select C sharp, all the samples here will be tuned to C sharp. One thing that I forgot to say is that you also have the possibility to tune all the sample, once they are tuned to the same root key, to a different value of the octaves in the range between -2 and +2. So if we set it to 0, if I change it to another root key, for example F, all the samples are tuned to F. And this can be really interesting because you might experiment by layering the sound on top of each other without caring about the tune, which is the same for all of them. You can put them against each other, juxtapose them against each other to experiment with new possibilities without caring about hitting the right keys on the instrument. The global only interests the pitch because all the other controls, volume envelope, that by the way includes attack, hold, decay, sustain, and release, they can still be controlled individually for all the samples. Okay. Another important thing that I would like to highlight is that you don't have to approach this library like a conventional piano library. This means that the way we have mapped the sample does not perfectly respect the chromatic organization of the sound along the keyboards like you would expect from a traditional instrument. For example, if you play this one, which is F sharp 4, and you press F sharp 3, of course you can hear that they are the same root key but with some distance between one octave. But don't expect to hear a clean, perfect pitch, okay? Because as I said, a lot of these sounds were recorded by experimenting with object, by doing a lot of weird experiments, so a lot of odd resonances happened. And in some cases, it's difficult to understand whether the note is, for example, F3 or F2. The only thing that you have keep in your mind is that when you press F and you are not in global mode, you will select, the sample will be, if you press, for example, F2, the sample will be tuned to F, okay? And same thing for all the other Fs along the keyboard, and same for all the other, for all the other keys. So this is the first feature that I wanted to show you. Another one that I think is a highlight of this library is this functionality that we have called Smash. Well, before discussing in detail what it is about, just let's have a listen. And let's hit this button here. So as you can see from the interface, by pressing the smash button, a number of samples are triggered at once. Okay, and every time that you trigger the button, the smash switch or the smash button, different samples are triggered. So basically what happens is that the script randomly selects a number of samples and triggers them all at once. And this can be interesting because by doing that, you can, first of all, create some interesting horror effects, like, for example, clusters and stabs. And you can achieve them easily without spending too much time moving knobs and designing the sound. So this was the basic idea behind this functionality, to give you the possibility to create some new sounds after the original ones just by pressing the button without spending too much time, as I said, about moving knobs and faders and achieve the sound that you want. Also, this can be interesting because as it's random, it gives you the possibility to create some new sounds that can inspire you. It can open new creative possibilities. So in the Smash screen, the first two things that I would like to describe you are these two knobs here that we'll call the brutality and weirdness. Basically, brutality controls the number of samples that are triggered at once when you smash virtually the piano. And you go from a minimum of 3 keys. You can see them colored in red here on the keyboard, up to 10. So when you select, when you put brutality to the maximum value, you have 10 samples that are triggered at once. Be careful here because the volume can easily go up to very dangerous values, so maybe put the general volume slider to a lower setting. So with the maximum value of brutality, you have 10 samples that are triggered at once. This other knob here that we've called weirdness basically controls the amount of detuning and stereo spread for each one of the samples that are triggered at once. So when weirdness is at its maximum value, each one of the samples that are randomly selected in the script are randomly detuned and randomly changed for the pan value. This allows you to create more atonal sounds, some cluster kind of sounds where all the pitches are random, so you cannot hear a clear pitch. And you can also have some interesting stereo spread that makes some cinematic big sounds that are both impactful at the same time and wide. Okay, so if we put on the other side weirdness to 0, it means that all the samples that are randomly triggered by the smash are kept at the same tuning that you have set in the interface, or that you find already in the interface, and same thing is also for the panning, for the stereo imaging. Then on this other column here, as you might have noticed, we have this choose your weapon thing that basically allows you to virtually smash the piano with different weapons, with different objects. You see hammer, that is the default selection, and there is katana, the Japanese word, and dynamite. Obviously we didn't use this in reality. There is some things that happen in background in the Kontakt script that basically allow you to create a different kind of sound according with the kind of weapon that you choose. As you can hear with the hammer, that is the one that we have used right now, you have some very sharp sound with a very sharp attack, some very impact and tight kind of sounds that can be very, very useful in the cinematic realm to create jump scare, hits, cinematic slams, and whatsoever. Let's see what we have, for example, if we select katana. So as you can hear, it's a very different kind of sound in comparison to the previous one. It sounds more like a cinematic transition, and the idea was to simulate the sound of a blade that is slided along the string of the piano. So you have this very long sample, this very transition kind of sounds that can be useful to create, as I said, cinematic transition, even whooshes or risers, etc. Then we have dynamite. Let's give it a try. simulate the sounds of an explosion. So corresponding to this weapon, there is some distortion that is added in the background to the sample, some down pitching of the sample, some reverb that is added, and this can be interesting to create sort of explosion sounds, boom sounds. There is a lot of things that you can do with that. What we have listened so far is when we are not in global pitch mode. Let's see what happens when we tune all the samples to the same root key, for example E, and let's see what happens if we smash the piano. Well, in this case, as the samples are tuned to the same root key, you have a stack of samples, as I said, in the same root key, so it's very useful to create powerful tonal stabs. Let's see what happens if we set the octaves to the octave to -1. Then, you know, a darker sound, or even to -2. Let's change to F. Let's go to the dynamic mode. So as you can hear, you can have a lot of interesting sounds that are different every time. So this is, as I say, this is the basic idea that lies behind these functionalities to make sound design versatile, powerful, and simple at the same time. We know that people mostly use Kontakt library as players of K rather than sound design instruments, but we believe that with the potential, with the possibilities of scripting and sound design, it's possible also to give you a further instrument to sculpt the sound, well, use the sounds as they are, but at the same time also create your own sounds. So one thing that you might want to do, let's get out of the global pitch mode. You can, in your DAW, regardless of the DAW that you're using, you can record the audio input from Kontakt and do your own audio track of samples. For example, you can set this audio track here to receive the audio input from Kontakt and then record all the smashes that I say that are different every time that you hit the button. So let's give it a try. So once that you have this track, you know, as you see on the screen with all these samples, you can then isolate them and do your own folders with your own samples out of the original ones in Piano. And then you can also experiment even more with these samples. For example, I might cut this one and reverse it to create a riser sound. Something like this. Wow, these sound pretty good to me. And I think these ones, you might layer them with other more classic, maybe cinematic sounds to have, you know, this sort of hybrid between a cinematic hit and a jump scare. Really scary, I have to say. So this is the very basics of the smasher. As I will show you in the rest of the video, you can also use it a lot of on the synched loops that are in this library. That are another highlight. I will get there in minutes. Another noticeable feature of Piano is this convolution module. If you have purchased our previous library Zittergeist, that is based on synthetic string sounds, zither sounds, it features the same module, so that you might be familiar with that. It's basically a convolution reverb that is, well, convolution is a pretty complicated mathematic techniques that in audio and music in particular is mostly used to replicate the reverberation of a real environment. Basically, it allows you to filter one sound within another one. So if you record how a reference sound, that usually is a white noise sound, for example, hand clapping, reverberates in a real environment, then you can apply that reverb via convolution to any other sound. However, you can also get this a little bit further and experiment with convolution with impulse responses that have nothing to do with real reverberation, but can be interesting to experiment with the sound. And the impulse responses in samples in piano and the convolution module fall under this umbrella. So you have a very wide selection of impulse responses that are divided in these two categories: textures and rhythm. So let's give it a try. For example, hot water burst. So this one fits as well. For the record, Geloso was a brand of an old tape recorder that was produced here in Italy, and so we have recorded a lot of sounds, all of these old devices, and use them as impulse responses. Well, the knob that I'm moving right now is the controls the wet amount of the effect, but you also have this one that controls the pre-delay of the convolution reverb, the sides, and then an high-pass filter and low-pass filter. And this is something that you might want to pay attention to, because you never know how a sound filters within another one. It would create some weird resonances at frequency peaks, so you can take advantage of these two filters to get rid of those and have the sound that you want. Let's see how this one works when we use it with the Smasher. Wow, I like this one. So I don't know. Radio worship. Let's see. Nice. Well, let's also have a look at the rhythmic textures, which basically are, as the name suggests, impulse responses which have some sort of rhythms and micro rhythms embedded to that can use your sounds also rhythmically. So let's, for example, select this one, workshop machine. That it sort of becomes like embedded in the sound. That can suggest you some rhythmical solution. It can spark definitely the inspiration. Let's try also another one, gym bike. Let's put here in tonal, in a global. The great thing about convolution reverb and experimenting with impulse responses is that you never know what you get when you use one of these responses. So this is a further encouragement to further encourage you to experiment with the sounds and make your own ones out of the original samples in piano. So I gave you the blueprint of how the script works. Just to recap, you have the individual setting for all the sample plus the global pitch that allows you to tune all the samples to the same root key. You have a piano smasher to create your cluster or tonal sounds, to make your own samples out of the originals, and then you have a convolution. Now I'll show you also Some other instruments that we have in Paint Piano. Well, for the tonal stabs, we have also this one, number 2, tonal stabs as well. I will just play some samples for you just to give you an idea, but I won't. You know, the script is exactly the same. Yeah, with the piano harmonium. You can hear this sort of wah wah that goes in the background. Maybe try to put it in a global pitch mode. Okay. Another interesting of this library that I've mentioned before is these 2 instruments here that are tempo synched loops. So I'll select this one. Okay, takes a while to load. Okay, this is basically a collection of loops that are played in real time. They have not been, programmed in the DAW. No, they have been played exactly as you will hear them. They are tempo synced to the tempo of the DAW, so the tempo will automatically adjust to the tempo settings that you have in your DAW, and each one of them, like the previous samples that we have seen, is in a specific root key. So if I press, for example, this one, that is on C2, it's tuned to C. Okay, it's a lot of rhythmic samples. There are 113 more. As you can hear, they are automatically tempo synced to the tempo of the DAW, and they are, each one of them, like the tonal samples that we have seen before, are tuned to a specific root key, and they are mapped in a consistent way. So what we have seen for the tonal sample is exactly the same also for the loops. And also for the global tuning, you can tune all of these samples, all of these loops to the same root key. And this can be really, really interesting, because then you can, experiment by overlapping these grooves on each other and come up with countless possibilities to create interesting rhythms. Now we have set everything to E. So you might just randomly select the loops from once that they are tuned to the same key and see what happens when you play them on the top of each other. I'll do a very random thing. Let's try another one. If we change, for example, the tune to G, well, all these rhythms, it was just me putting my hands randomly on my keyboard. So that's to stress the importance to have the possibility to simultaneously tune all the samples and grooves in particular to the same root key. This is basically the same combination of loops just by changing the root key. So this is a very interesting feature that can spark, again, creativity and the interest to experiment with the basic loops and create your own samples. In this regard, the Smash utility can be very, very useful if you are in global pitch mode, because as you remember, by smashing the piano, a number of samples will be selected randomly, and if you have them on the same root key, you can come up with potentially endless samples. So let's give it a try. We are now in F. So let's see what happens when we trigger 10 loops together with a hammer weapon. That's interesting. Just to, it's tuned to F. So if I play F here, okay, so you can hear the root note. Let's give it a try for someone else. Well, an important thing is that when you smash the loops, they will go on forever. So to stop them, you have to basically press stop on your DAW. And also in this case, you can do the same thing to record. Okay. Oh, another thing is that I would like to play you some loops also at a different timing. For example, 90 BPM. Let's see what happens. Nice. Try another one. Oh, I won't record this one. Let's try another key, D sharp maybe. Another interesting thing is that some of these loops are not they have different time signatures. Some of them are in 4, others are in 3. So by overlapping them, you can create some interesting polyrhythms, a lot of interesting rhythmical solutions. We are actually, another thing is that you can experiment also a lot with this with rhythmical textures. For example. This is just an example. I'm just selecting them very randomly. See? There is the rhythmical texture that adds some micro rhythms in background. Really interesting. And an important thing for the convolution is that, and this is not our fault, it's a peculiarity of the convolution reverb in Kontakt, is that you cannot adjust it in real time. Okay, so you have first set the values of, except for the wet. For all the other parameters, you need to preset them actually before triggering the sample. If you do it in real time, it won't respond immediately. Okay, so this is the synched loop instrument. You have 2 synched loop instruments. I play some very randomly for you. Let's try a couple of smashes. Well, this one where without tuning the sample to the same, outside, not in global pitch mode. I don't know if it can be of any interest of triggering loops in a completely random way for the pitch and for the pan pop, for the pan, but in case you want, you can do it, and you never know that you can come up with something interesting. So let's tune everything to E. Yeah, this was very good. So you might also experiment with these sounds outside of the cinematic genre. I mean, everything that also maybe in hip hop, other electronic genres can be of some interest to experiment with these sounds. So another instrument that I would like to show you is a bowed piano, which is basically the piano string that were bowed with the cello horsehair. And also here you can have a lot of great sounds. Well, although these samples are also tonal, the bow in itself, all the friction, all the squeaking sounds that you have when bowing the samples don't make the pitch that clear, but they are still tunable, as for the previous instrument, and by pitching it down 2 octaves, you can have some, and using a bit of convolution reverb, you can come up with, for example, interesting atmospheres. So you can do both texture sounds, organic atmosphere sounds as stutters, transition, and something like that. I mean, also this is a very versatile thing. Also in this case, we don't want to renounce to the fun of seeing how they sound when they are smashed. Sounds like sort of an organic Bram. That's another one. Okay, there are some other instruments that I would like to show you that are a bit different than the previous one. So I will upload this one that is called Stabs and Cluster. Well, basically, as you can see, the Kontakt interface is the same, but as they are not tonal sounds, they are atonal without a clearly perceivable pitch. When you do the global tuning, you don't have a root key, but you have actually semitones. But first of all, just let me play some of the sounds for you. So if you want to, you can still tune them globally, but sorry, instead of a root key, as these sounds, as I say, are pretty toneless, say atonal, you can just set a global pitch for them, so you can shift the tuning from the original one in the interface in this way. So we can downshift them downpitch them of 20 semitones. Some interesting dark sounds. other instruments that I want to show you. That is, as for this one, mostly composed of non-tonal atonal sound. It's called ripped string, although the sounds are a different category. Okay, so they are mostly ripped string because the sound comes from sliding objects, even chains on the piano strings, and obtain this sort of transition effect. And finally, we have this instrument here that is called the Tune Ghost Piano. These are mostly samples from this old 19th century piano and old saloon piano that was in very good shape because of very ancient piano, and so it created these very interesting resonances, but they still have some tonal peculiarity to them. In this case, you can tune down to the same. I've tried to summarize all the functionalities in Paint Piano to show you the kind of sounds that you would find in that. It's a mostly horror cinematic thing, but you can also experiment it outside of these the boundaries of this genre. As I said, we are running a deal for the instrument that will be prolonged until April the 30, which is longer than we usually do, but we are in a very difficult moment, all of us. And so as a developer, as an independent developer, I try to do the best that I can to keep my activity sustainable, but at the same time make it accessible for everyone. So this is the spirit of this $29 deal for the library, and the possibility to bundle it up with Synched and pay it half price. I take this moment to first of all to thank all the people that sent me a message during this time. I'm based in Italy, and the situation is very difficult here, and a lot of people, a lot of the lovely friends of Silence and Other Sounds took the time to write a message to ask how I stay, how I was, me and my family, and I really appreciate that, and I would like to thank you all for this kind words. And I wish you to stay strong, stay healthy, and stay safe, and stay creative as well, because we have a privilege as a musician, as a composer and developers, is that we live immersed in our reality and in our dream and the things that we love the most. So to a certain extent, we are a little bit, I could say, isolated from what happens outside. So at least in my case, the situation didn't affect that much my daily routine. But it's very important to stay positive and to stay creative. Well, I think that's all, and I hope that you guys have enjoyed the video, and see you next time. Bye.